Man, replaying some games from years ago made me realize how far ahead of their time they were. In fact, some of them feel so modern that they easily surpass most of what's being released today. And if you haven't played any of the 15 games on this list, you might want to run and check them out, because you could be missing true masterpieces that defined an era. So, no filler and no sponsored list, let's get straight to the point. The Witcher 3 Wild Hunt. It's almost scary to think that even after all these years, The Witcher 3 still feels more next-gen than half the RPGs coming out today. What makes this a masterpiece isn't just the scale, but the narrative logic density. Most modern open worlds feel like a checklist, but CD Projekt Red built a world governed by a massive global flag system. Technically, this means that even a minor side quest in the first act can physically alter the world state or dialogue options 30 hours later. That level of branching complexity is a nightmare to code, and most studios today simply take the easy way out with linear paths. Then you look at the Red Engine's environmental atmosphere. Even before the 2026 hardware we have now, the way they handled vertex-based wind physics was revolutionary. The trees don't just wiggle, they react to the intensity of a storm in a way that creates a palpable sense of dread. When you pair that with the adaptive soundscape, where the music layers shift based on your combat performance, you get an immersion level that feels handcrafted. It's better than today's games because it refuses to use procedural filler. Every monster has a unique AI pattern, and every village has a soul. Replaying this today with modern ray tracing feels like seeing the world the way the developers originally dreamed it. Call of Juarez Gunslinger. This is the ultimate sleeper hit that proves bigger isn't always better. Call of Juarez Gunslinger is a technical masterclass in unreliable narrator integration. While modern shooters are obsessed with realism, this game uses its engine to play with your perspective. Technically, it uses a real-time level morphing system. As Silas Greaves tells his tall tales, the map literally changes in front of your eyes. Paths open up, enemies vanish, and the lighting shifts to match his exaggerations. It's a brilliant use of dynamic asset loading that keeps the gameplay constantly surprising. The combat also features a kinetic feedback loop that most modern FPS titles completely miss. The sense of impact when you land a shot is backed by a specific hit reaction physics rig that makes every duel feel weighty and consequential. It's better than today's games because it has a high-octane identity. It's not trying to sell you a battle pass or a 100-hour grind. It's a tight, focused arcade-style western that runs on a highly optimized version of the Chrome engine. Replaying it reminds you of a time when fun was the primary technical requirement. Sekiro: Shadows Die Twice. If you want to talk about mechanical purity, you talk about Sekiro. This game is a surgical strike of game design. From Software moved away from the RPG bloat of Dark Souls to create a frame data masterpiece. Technically, the parry and posture system is built on frame-perfect collision detection. While modern action games often have floaty hitboxes, Sekiro requires a level of precision that makes the combat feel like a rhythm game disguised as a samurai duel. The vertical navigation logic is the other standout. The grappling hook isn't just a gimmick, it's integrated into the AI's search and detection mesh. Enemies will actually track your verticality, forcing a 3D chess match during stealth segments. It's better than today's games because it has zero friction. The load times are near instant, the controls are the most responsive in the genre, and there is no level gating to hide behind. It is a technical test of your own skill, and replaying it today is a reminder that when an engine is this polished, the gameplay becomes timeless.
It's the ultimate get-good experience that still feels like it was released yesterday. Castlevania Lords of Shadow. We need to give more credit to the sheer architectural grandeur of Lords of Shadow. This is a game that used its engine to create a gothic epic that still looks stunning in 2026. Technically, Mercury Steam used a fixed camera cinematography approach that allowed them to cheat the hardware and push the geometric complexity of the environments to insane levels. Because the camera is controlled, every frame is composed like a painting, allowing for high-fidelity material shaders on stone, fur, and leather that shouldn't have been possible on that era's tech. The Titan physics rigs are the real wow factor here. Climbing those massive colossi requires the engine to handle a player character moving across a massive animating physics body while maintaining a huge draw distance in the background. It's better than today's games because it has a prestige scale. The voice acting, the orchestral score, and the technical ambition combine to create a grand adventure feeling that modern, live-service action games rarely capture. It's a tragic, beautiful story that uses its technical limitations to its advantage, proving that art direction will always outlast raw polygon counts.
Deus Ex Human Revolution. When people talk about immersive sims, they usually point to this as the gold standard, and they're right. Deus Ex Human Revolution is a masterclass in multi-layered systems architecture. While modern games give you a choice that usually just changes a dialogue line, this game's engine is built on physical pathing logic. Every room, every boss arena, and every city hub is a 3D puzzle with at least 4 or 5 entry points that the AI and physics systems have to account for simultaneously. Whether you're hacking a terminal through a specialized minigame logic layer or stacking physical objects to bypass a security gate, the game never breaks its own rules. The technical flavor of this game comes from its social AI engine. Using the Cassie augmentation, the game performs a real-time psychological analysis of NPCs, tracking their micro-expressions and heart rates to give you a tactical advantage in conversation. It's better than today's games because it has intentionality. In 2026, we see so many open worlds filled with junk data, but in Human Revolution, every vent leads somewhere, and every email on a hacked computer expands the world state. It's a tight, focused, and incredibly smart technical achievement that makes you feel like a high-tech ghost in a golden-hued machine.
Control. If you want to see what happens when a developer masters environmental destruction and physics-based combat, you play Control. Remedy Entertainment used their proprietary Northlight engine to create a world that is essentially one giant interactive physics object. Technically, the standout feature is the global object fracturing. In most games, if you throw a chair at a wall, nothing happens. In Control, the engine calculates the force of the impact, shatters the wall into unique, non-pre-baked chunks, and leaves the debris scattered on the floor for the rest of the fight. The volumetric lighting and material response are also 10 out of 10. The way light refracts through the brutalist concrete of the oldest house creates a mood that is physically heavy. It's better than today's games because it uses physics as a primary weapon. Your telekinesis isn't just a spell, it's a tool that interacts with the object metadata of the entire room. You can rip a piece of the floor up to use as a shield, or pull a fire extinguisher off the wall to create an explosion. Replaying this today, especially with the ray tracing features fully enabled, shows a level of technical chaos that modern games often tone down to keep the frame rate stable. It's a sensory overload in the best way possible. Quantum Break, often overshadowed by Control, Quantum Break is actually a more ambitious technical flex when it comes to time dilation simulation. This game features some of the most complex baked and real-time lighting transitions ever put in a third-person shooter. Because the story involves time literally breaking, the engine has to handle stutter effects, where the environment loops, freezes, or explodes in reverse. This isn't just a visual filter, it's a physics state manipulation, where the engine is rapidly switching between different versions of the same map geometry. The performance capture and digital doubles here were years ahead of their time. The characters don't just look like the actors, like Sean Ashmore and Lance Reddick. They move with a subsurface skin shading and micro-expression rigging that makes them feel human even in 2026. It's better than today's games because it was a high-budget experiment. It blended a live-action show with a high-fidelity game, requiring a specialized video streaming integration within the game files. It's a 10 out of 10 visual spectacle that reminds us of a time when developers were willing to risk everything on a wild technical concept.
Far Cry 3, we have to go back to the game that redefined the systemic open world. Far Cry 3 is a masterpiece of emergent AI ecosystems. Using the Dunya engine, Ubisoft created a jungle that actually felt alive. The technical standout here is the fire spread and vegetation interaction. If you throw a Molotov, the fire isn't just a static sprite, it's a procedural entity that spreads based on wind direction and the flammability variables of the grass. Modern sequels have actually simplified this system, but in Far Cry 3, it was a core tactical tool. The predator-prey AI logic is the other soul of the game. Animals don't just exist for you to hunt, they have their own navigation meshes and will interact with human NPCs regardless of whether you're there or not. This creates unscripted moments, like a tiger attacking a guard post while you're sniping from a hill, that feel more authentic than the scripted events of modern open worlds. It's better than today's games because it has a vibrant technical balance. It's not too big, it's not too bloated, and the gunplay has a weight to it that makes every outpost takeover feel like your own personal action movie. It's a mandatory revisit because it reminds us why we fell in love with open worlds in the first place. Fallout 4. While everyone argues about the RPG mechanics, from a technical perspective, Fallout 4 is an absolute beast of object persistence and global scripting. This is something modern RPG lights still can't touch. The creation engine is famously known for its junk logic. Technically, the game tracks the physical location and state of thousands of individual items across the entire Commonwealth. If you drop a customized laser rifle in a random corner of the glowing sea, the World State Database remembers it. This creates a sense of physical permanence that makes the world feel lived in and real, rather than just a stage that resets when you leave the area. But the real soul of Fallout 4 is the modular settlement and crafting system. This isn't just a minigame, it's a high-level nav mesh manipulation tool. When you build a wall or a turret, the game's AI pathfinding has to recalculate in real time to figure out how raiders should navigate your new fortress. It's better than today's games because it offers systemic freedom. You aren't just a visitor in the wasteland, you are a technician modifying the cell geometry. Replaying it in 2026 with modern script extender mods shows just how robust this engine actually is. It's a platform for infinite creativity that modern locked-down games are too scared to provide. Tom Clancy's The Division. If you want to see the gold standard for urban environmental fidelity, you have to go back to the original The Division.
The Snowdrop engine was, and still is, a technical miracle of dynamic weather and material interaction. In 2026, we see snow used as a flat texture, but in The Division, the snow has accumulation and melting logic. It gathers on the hoods of abandoned cars, and if you stand near a fire barrel, you can actually watch the mesh recede in real time. This level of environmental feedback creates an atmosphere of desolation that is physically heavy. The global illumination and volumetric fog in Midtown Manhattan are 10 out of 10. When a blizzard kicks in, the visibility vector drops, and the AI's detection radius actually shrinks to match the player's sightline. It's better than today's games because it has tactile detail. You can shoot individual tires on a car to lower its height for better cover, or shut a car door as you slide past it. This requires a level of micro-collision programming that most modern developers skip because it's too much work. Replaying it today reminds you that when the technical foundation is this polished, a looter shooter becomes a haunting cinematic experience. Resident Evil 7 Biohazard. This is the game that saved the franchise and redefined photogrammetry in horror. Resident Evil 7 is a 10 out of 10 masterclass in material realism. Capcom's RE engine was built specifically to handle high-resolution scans of real-world objects, and it shows. The Baker House isn't just a 3D model, it feels like a physical location because the texture mapping captures every stain of mold and every splinter of wood with a gross-out level of detail. Technically, the engine handles subsurface scattering for flesh so well that the Baker family looks uncomfortably human, even when they're being monsters. The soundscape and binaural audio are the other technical pillars. The engine tracks occlusion logic. If Jack Baker is walking on the floorboards above you, the sound is muffled and directional based on the acoustic geometry of the house. It's better than today's games because it has technical constraint. By keeping the scale small and claustrophobic, the developers were able to push the lighting and particle effects to their absolute limits. It's a tight 10-hour nightmare that uses its technical polish to bypass your brain's "it's just a game" filter. It's the ultimate prestige horror experience that still feels like a benchmark in 2026. Dark Souls 3. To finish this block, we have the pinnacle of boss logic and combat fluidity. Dark Souls 3 is a technical masterpiece of animation priority and frame data balancing. Moving on from the slower pace of the previous games, From Software utilized the Bloodborne engine architecture to create a much faster, snappier experience. Technically, the hitbox accuracy in this game is god tier. If you duck under a horizontal swing from a boss, it's because your character's collision mesh physically cleared the attack's active damage frames. The LOD, or level of detail management, is the other wow factor. When you stand on the high walls of Lothric and look out, every castle, swamp, and cathedral you see is a physical entity you will eventually visit. This requires a massive world streaming architecture that manages the transition from low poly distant vistas to high poly playable areas seamlessly. It's better than today's games because it has mechanical honesty. It doesn't use rubber banding or fake difficulty. It uses technical precision to test your patience and skill. Replaying it today is a reminder that difficulty is just another word for technically perfect game design. Ryse, Son of Rome. This is the game that shouldn't exist, technically speaking. Ryse, Son of Rome was an Xbox One launch title, yet in 2026, it still looks better than 90% of the action games hitting the market. How? Because of the CryEngine's uncompromising fidelity, Crytek didn't just make a game, they made a technical benchmark for digital human performance. The character models in Ryse feature a level of subsurface scattering and micro-expression rigging that makes the skin look alive, reflecting sweat and blood in real time. Even a decade later, the cloth physics on the Roman armor and the god ray lighting through the forests are staggering. But the real technical soul is the cinematic combat flow. While the combat was criticized for being simple, the animation blending is world-class. When Marius executes a barbarian, the engine transitions from player control to a pre-recorded sequence so seamlessly that it feels like a high-budget movie. It's better than today's games because it represents visual ambition in its purest form. It didn't try to be an open-world grind. It stayed a focused, 7-hour graphical masterpiece that respects your time. Replaying it on a modern PC at 4K today is a jaw-dropping reminder that Crytek were absolute wizards with lighting and geometry. Sleeping Dogs. If you want to talk about a game with a technical heart, you talk about Sleeping Dogs. This game humbles modern open worlds because of its environmental combat integration. While other games give you a big city with nothing to do, United Front Games used their engine to create a contextual sandbox. Technically, the grab and environment system is more complex than any modern brawler. The game tracks hundreds of interactive nodes, from telephone booths and meat hooks to air conditioners, and allows you to use them in combat with unique, brutal animations. The atmospheric rendering of Hong Kong is the other 10 out of 10 feature. The way the neon lights reflect off the wet surface shaders during a tropical rainstorm is a masterclass in reflective post-processing. Even without modern ray tracing, the mood is more convincing than most 2026 cyberpunk cities. It's better than today's games because it has mechanical variety. You have a deep kung fu system, high-speed action hijacks where you jump between moving cars, and a face meter that rewards you for being stylish. It's a game with personality in its code, proving that you don't need a map the size of a country if every street corner feels this alive. Metro Exodus. To finish our list, we have the gold standard for atmospheric immersion engineering. Metro Exodus is a technical beast because of its full-cycle ray-traced global illumination. Specifically, if you play the Enhanced Edition in 2026, you are looking at one of the first games to be built from the ground up with hardware-accelerated lighting. This isn't just a pretty effect, it's a technical shift where every light source, your flashlight, a torch, the glowing mushrooms, actually bounces light realistically around the environment. It changes the way you play stealth because the shadows are physically accurate. The tactile interaction model is the final soul of this masterpiece. 4A games refuse to use a traditional HUD. You have to physically pull out a map, manually pump your air rifle, and wipe the mud off your gas mask in real time. This requires a massive amount of first-person body presence animation, where the camera is physically attached to Artyom's rig. It's better than today's games because it refuses to take shortcuts. It makes the world feel heavy and dangerous through its technical clunkiness, forcing you to live in the world instead of just playing a game. It is a haunting, technically flawless survival journey that stands as a peak of the genre. And that wraps up our list. 15 games that prove that older doesn't mean outdated. These titles were built with a level of technical integrity and creative soul that, even in 2026, many games are still trying to catch up to. But now, I want to hear from you. Which of these classics are you reinstalling tonight? Is there a game that didn't make the list, but in your opinion defines an entire generation? Let's start a conversation in the comments.